I'm Leo PD, a producer for this channel, and we will be installing a window shield on my own Tesla new car. So when we're going up here, we need to take off our shoes. Yeah, you have to always take off your shoes. This part is plastic, so it's very slippery. So you could get hurt. It's very dangerous. Take off your shoes and go up. If you fall down from here, that must be a back injury, right? The car or the person gets hurt. It's either of them. Car's not important. You are. Car's more important. It's around 1400 millimeters. Is that the biggest window in Korea right now? Usually rear windows are 75 centimeters, so it's around double. So it's double, so it's quite difficult to handle, especially these curvatures. I'll explain a little as we keep progressing. This process of trying to flatten the film by oneself in itself is very helpful. If you use a knife like that, doesn't it scratch the window? That will be unacceptable to us. This blade doesn't scratch. It might seem like a normal blade, but it doesn't cause scratches. Is it because it's different? The material is different. If you want to know, down in the comment section. Since there are so much regions that we have to shrink, the borders can get heated up as well. So you always have to be careful. If you just keep shrinking without paying attention, then you won't know that this part is getting burned. Does the tape get burned? No, the car itself. If the car goes above 250 degrees, this melts. But we use 630 degrees. So you have to be careful that the surface temperature doesn't go over 100 degrees, 200 degrees, and control this. It's a huge issue. Another problem is, while we're doing this, you have to finish this at once, in one try. As you saw this, it took us around 5 minutes to set this up. Shrinking, installing takes 1 hour 30 minutes, and you make a mistake. You redo that, that's almost 4 hours. There's a possibility you're stuck doing this for 4 hours. So you have to put your life on the line and try to do it in one try. That kind of thing causes a lot of loss. It might take less to do a whole car instead of this one window. That's why a lot of shops are talking about the pricing aspect. Each shop has a different way to gain their profit. There are some shops that earn a lot of money when there's a lot of customers, but others only need a few customers, and some only can do one. But those shops that can do many multiple at the same time, Tesla might create some loss. Instead of doing one car like this, you could do 2 to 2.5. So this is much more difficult and takes a lot of time. There's not much room to do the shrinking here. I need that extra bit. Installing on a Tesla means that you have to shrink a huge, big window. And you have to get rid of all of these curvatures. Not by adding a lot more heat on it, but you have to disperse it. It's the art of dispersion. If you don't calculate and just keep shrinking, there's gonna be more and more curves. You have to ride all those edges to the end to be able to do this perfectly. Those of you who have already heat shrunk a Model X or a Model 3 would know that you have to go from the middle towards the edges. Seeing this should be helpful. You have to calculate where you're going to put the heat, how much heat is coming out to the end, and where the final destination on the window it is to do this very well. You can't just heat shrink wherever there is some curvature. What's most important is that after you've shrunk, the final product has to be pretty smooth without you applying your hand on it. It has to be smooth to know that the layers inside the film doesn't mean that it has been broken up and that it's been well preserved and doesn't cause any problems with visibility. This part, it requires a lot of shrinking, so there's a possibility that you over shrink. So leave a little bit at the edges so to prevent that kind of thing. So leave at the edges. So even if you do over shrink, it'll be okay and it fits. This side has to be exactly the same as the window and glass. As you know, this isn't just flimsy plastic, it's PT plastic. So it's more sturdy. What happens when we add heat to plastic? Does it shrink or does it expand? It shrinks. PT will shrink. So this one isn't expanding, it's shrinking. If it were to expand, we'd have so much more curvature. You need to kill these edges so that they become more curved and rounded. If it's sharp like that, then heat concentrates and it gets burned, partly. Spread the heat around all over the film. So you have to make it in a round fashion. As you can see over there, in the side, it's very rounded. If shrinking happens only partly, strongly, then the film gets ruined. So those films that are difficult to shrink, we usually use 350 to 400 degrees. But at that temperature, to do this car, it'll take forever, for a whole day. So you have to use 630 degrees and move quickly. The temperature on the window itself is most important, so you have to use speed to spread out the temperature. We haven't cut properly the film yet. We're gonna have to recut it according to the edges of the window. We cut it just a little bit big right now. After shrinking, we'll cut it again to fit the window. Do people usually use molds to cut the film for Teslas? It's difficult to have those because there's so much shrinking. So to cut it at that size and you shrink it, you could do it, but at the edges is gonna get burnt. So you have to cut it again. And that's gonna reduce the adhesive or make it too stiff. So you would have to cut those out and then only use the correct parts on the window. So whoever installs, you're gonna have to cut it bigger. For this car, it's the only way. You can't use molds to use it. The film can react differently, so don't aim all the parts in one way. In the case of edges, if it seems like it's gonna get overshrunk here, then you have to move the heat gun towards this way. If you keep using it this way, since there's no film here, it has to be overshrunk in that way. So you have to move the heat gun towards this, towards the body. You can see it already. The heat has to reach until this part, until the edges, and it has to hold towards the end. That's why this can shrink. If you look at what I'm doing here, you might have seen spray painting on the body of a car. So we usually use that as a spray. And if you look at it how we do it, you usually keep moving back and forth so it doesn't spray too much on one part. So if you think about spraying the heat, then this might seem much more easier to understand. So same speed, same distance, and then you keep moving back and forth quickly. And you keep moving back and forth. You return to the same position. And then that will make the final product a lot more pretty. This might seem slow. This is pretty quick. So the shape has to be really pretty so that when you're putting it on the window inside, it won't fold or it won't create any kind of inconsistencies. It's important to try to use your hand as little as possible. You use the heat of the heat gun to spread it out all over this place. Look at this, like a spray. So the middle part, you just shrink a little bit, and then you shrink at the end. First part here, then the next corner, then the middle. Then you have to have this kind of shape. This triangle has to form. You start at the corner and then you slowly move inside towards the middle, and then towards the edge. Usually most people know that you start from the middle and then you go outside, but this includes the windshield. When you're doing a big window like the Tesla, you have to start from the edge and then you have to bring the film towards the edges. With just this one kind of theory, this will help a lot. If you can't do this, then you can't install at all. If there's too much shrinking in one part, we might not be able to see it. But inside the construction of the film itself, that breaks, it falls down. It burns, it stiffens. We might not see this though. If the structure fails, then with the UV rays, heat, 1 year, 2 year, then it starts to break down earlier than other normal films. People might not notice it or might not care, but there will be a lot more wear and tear, and the IR reduction will disappear quicker. Or the color might fade quicker. Color fading is usually the last symptom that appears. You usually first lose the heat resistance aspect of a film. That disappears. The IR reduction disappears, and then color starts to fade away. When the internal structure fails, that's when it fades. Then when the IR reduction, it fails, then do consumers normally feel that? If that happened overnight, yeah, you might notice it. But mostly no one notices because the ability is slowly fading away. So over 3 years, a little bit. So after a season, the driver can't notice it. The color might have faded into a purple, but the driver might think it's very natural, that it hasn't changed at all. People don't notice the process of changing. They don't remember this because they're used to it, because it changes a little bit by bit. For the exterior to be cleanly and for a long time preserved, then the film, the edges of the film have to be very well made. So the people who drive will feel that inner peace throughout it and feel very happy when they start to drive.